Today at approximately 1100 hours, a filing was presented to the Court of Appeals for the Federal District in the nation's capital, and just up the street from the White House, to correct a manifest injustice and to quell what has all of the indicia of a rebellion and insurrection against the authority of the United States, at least at the Merit Systems Protections Board, with the full support of the Federal Workers Union, who are fully aware and who have done nothing to publish it, disseminate it to their members, or correct it. With only one exception for whistleblower complaints, an exception recently recognized by the Federal District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia in response to efforts taken on behalf of the current president to grant effect to a measure introduced to the Congress by Democrat Elijah Cummings that in April 2017, shortly after the longest lack of a quorum at the MSPB had begun, had to date been ignored by the courts. The Court of Appeals, the Federal District, is the court statutorily granted exclusive jurisdiction to review challenges to personnel actions that are brought by federal employees, federal retirees, federal job applicants. It is significant that according to their own annual report, over 6,000 federal employees, applicants, and retirees here present challenges to personnel actions. These claims are filed through a convenient online portal, generally without assistance from professional counsel, and far too often by federal employees who have chosen not to join the Federal Workers Union, as well as the admitted thousands of federal job applicants who are ineligible to join the Federal Workers Union. And of these claims presented in layman terms by ordinary people, perhaps like yourself, your family, your friends and neighbors, only 300 survive per year. The review by professional attorneys who are employed by the Merit Systems Protection Board. If this attrition rate was not tragic enough, during the last presidential administration, what appears to be a coordinated effort of the board members at MSPB was set in place to sabotage that adjudicative tribunal as one by one the board members resigned or departed to their appointments without replacement, even offered by the former president, leaving Mark Robbins, the current general counsel for the Office of Personnel Management, the sole surviving member of the board for the MSPB, but with no authority to adjudicate cases after January 7, 2017, because that board lacked a quorum. And since the inauguration for the present administration, which several members of Congress notably boycotted the Senate, Democrats on the Senate Committee for Homeland Security and Government Affairs have decided to block the nominations presented by the current president by voting no proxy, essentially a protest vote objecting the nominees without even presenting the reasons for their rejections, and sacrificing the appeals of right for federal employees and federal job applicants simply because of their pettiness and obstinacy and partisan allegiance, ignoring the basic fact in American jurisprudence that justice delayed is justice denied. And today, that delay is mounting on 3 years with only rare mentions in the trade press. No mention on the national news networks and major publications that publish stories each day when federal workers stopped receiving paychecks during the longest government shutdown that was resolved after only 39 days. Significant for interest groups and attorneys who have examined the slaughterhouse litigations at MSPB, who have made significant findings based upon jurisprudential knowledge, is that they have found an alarming that of the 300 claims that had survived each year before MSPB lost its quorum, in over 95% of the cases, the original agency determinations that the claims were without merit were affirmed by the board. Yet not one concern was expressed by incumbent congressmen like Virginia's Congressman Jerry Conley in the 11th Congressional District, which has, of record, the most civilian federal employees in the nation, nor in Virginia's 8th Congressional District by former Congressman Jim Moran, nor his successor, Congressman Don Beyer, in the congressional district that is the 58th most reliable congressional district in the nation, which has the most federal workers when combining military and civilian personnel, and which, according to the Washington Post in 2017, is the single kingmaker district that decided the outcome of the 2016 presidential election and all statewide races for the past 2 decades, at least. Also, both legally and operationally significant is the finding that the administrative judges who present the initial decisions for MSPB are not judges at all, but rather only federal government attorneys who are granted or delegated the authority to decide cases for which their job experience has oriented them towards finding faults with litigant claims resulting in the slaughterhouse attrition. Although the terms used by MSPB sound a lot like the administrative law judges that are authorized in other federal agencies and are well familiar to attorneys engaged in the practice of administrative law, administrative judges are not synonymous terms, and it is a consciously malevolent act indicative of malice for any attorney to present them to a layman as the same thing. While one would expect under popular acclaim promoted in the media that it might be progressives in the Democratic Party that would have taken action to correct these abuses, it was in fact the House Republican Conference under Washington State Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers who introduced and passed the All Circuits Review Extension Act of 2012 to authorize whistleblower claimants to challenge the decisions of the MSPB in any federal circuit court of their choice and convenience to disrupt the exclusive jurisdiction of the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit and to encourage the development of what attorneys describe as a split circuit. To simplify this legal term of art, one must understand that in courts, cases are decided based upon past precedent or prior court decisions under the doctrine of stare decisis. And by expanding the number of potential circuit courts to review whistleblower claims, it was the hope of Republicans in Congress that the law of large numbers might operate to produce varying results in other circuit courts that challenged the rubber stamp pattern of the MSPB that had been in evidence at the Court of Appeals for Federal Districts since the creation of the MSPB under the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 in the Carter administration. But since it was a controversial issue, widely misunderstood by most in the electorate, especially the highly educated and enlightened, the All Circuits Review Extension Act was only presented, passed, and enacted as a temporary pilot program with an expiration date. And it is significant that for whatever reason, the word was not disseminated by even the Federal Workers Union to anyone, as when that act had expired, there was not any record that anyone had ever used it in the courts. But the House Republican Conference remained determined to provide a lifeboat, at least for whistleblower claims, the most vulnerable class of federal employees, and somehow convinced Congressman Elijah Cummings a Democrat from Baltimore and current chairman of the House Committee on Government Reform, to reintroduce the measure in the 115th Congress, not as an extension of the pilot program, but as a permanent measure, a task he was all too happy to accept, if only to pass legislation in a Republican-controlled Congress that he could use in campaigns back in his district to claim that he had helped the federal government employees within the oversight of his committee. But when it became clear to Congressman Cummings that he was, in fact, supporting non-union members in a measure enacted by the current president that would also provide a lifeboat for persons seeking to avoid a decision by the MSPB altogether, he quickly retreated from any association with the All Circuits Review Act, Public Law 115-195, and even today claims that the only person in his office who knew anything about it was a staffer who no longer works there. Yet, in the limited trade press that has published anything at all about the longest lack of a quorum at MSPB, most claiming to support federal government employees have placed the blame with Republicans and the president for not addressing the increasing backlog, and in January 2018, the acting chairman of the MSPB, Mark Robbins, today the general counsel for OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, took credit for handling single-handedly 750 of the 765 cases in the growing backlog, most by remanding the final decision to the administrative judges who initially dismissed the claim to dismiss them yet again, while he received applause from the unions and the trade press. Yet 4 months later, on May 11th, 2018, Mark Robbins reversed his claims of success and decided to publish a new withdrawal policy without even submitting his proposal for public comments that are required by the Administrative Procedures Act, as well as the Code of Federal Regulations governing the operation of the Merit System Protection Board. And he specifically stated that he took this action to address the very backlog he had said he had resolved in January 2018. More concerning is the fact that he took this action in what, on all evidence, was an attempt to fraudulently induce those surviving claims to forfeit their appeal of right to the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit by authorizing those claimants to volunteer to request a withdrawal and take their claim to another court, which any attorney can tell you is contrary to the federal rules of civil procedure, because a court can only review an order that is adverse to the litigant. The underlying claim in the final order, regardless of what MSPB is today saying in court, is of no legal significance, and a final order that grants a request for withdrawal is not adverse to you because your wish was granted. Be very careful about that for which you pray. In at least 3 litigations filed in federal courts on behalf of the current president, but with total silence in the progressive press and Federal Workers Union, MSPB has defended its withdrawal policy and attempted to quash those claims with arguments tantamount to fraud presented to a court punishable by not just civil contempt, but criminal contempt, punishable by up to 6 months in prison. And it becomes crystal clear as to why MSPB and progressives promoting impeachment have taken this drastic action when it is understood that the withdrawal policy was decreed not just to address the backlog, nor obviously to aid federal workers and job applicants, but to silence a single whistleblower claim that involves a prima facie case of a bribery attempt that was ordered by former President Barack Obama, specifically to alter the outcome of the federal elections in 2016, where Hillary Rodham Clinton defeated the president by only a mere 5 points. And today, with growing support from the Department of Justice that gave 99% of its donations to Hillary Clinton in 2016, we filed on behalf of the current president a precedent to order the assistance of the United States Marshal Service to effect service of process for a petition for writ of mandamus with the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit that would reverse its prior decision and compel MSPB to investigate criminal activity that it has failed to investigate since at least February 7, 2018, the latest date upon which it knew or should have known that a crime had in fact been committed. This elevated measure was taken only because since September 26, 2019, coincidentally around the same time that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced her decision to pursue impeachment based on a whistleblower claim, with no criminal conduct found, MSPB has taken active measures to evade service of process by a commercial process server. Actions amounting to obstruction of justice, a felony punishable by up to 20 years, and ironically the same provision under which the mob boss Al Capone was initially brought to justice even before the tax evasion claim. In what can only be described as insurrection, Congressman Adam Schiff and others in the Democratic House leadership continue to promote a narrative that the framers wanted impeachment to include more than criminal conduct, a legal argument that is found neither in the plain word meaning of Article 2, Section 4, nor the Federalist Papers treatment that were written by Alexander Hamilton. Moreover, a progressive press continues to promote and incite the general public about a whistleblower complaint that even the Justice Department has found contained no criminal conduct on behalf of the president. An argument that the press had deemed sufficient when former FBI Director Comey stated that Hillary Clinton's actions with her personal server could only be described as gross negligence. Moreover, evidence of well-known connections to foreign influences like George Soros, even in evidence in a recent Arlington campaign for the Commonwealth Attorney being ignored while House Democrats promote aspersions of treason by the current president in a country where Democrat hopeful Joe Biden's son actually worked for a considerable sum is unconscionably lacking in principle and wholly subversive in inciting their voters, especially before the upcoming November election, to challenge the authority of the United States of America. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.